Everyone has moments in life they can't just stop thinking about. They can be embarrassing things, like that one time you face planted in front of a group of teenagers, or something amazing like the first time you hosted your family for the holidays. And on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, hosted by me, Keke Palmer, and presented by BMW, we know to savor the good memories and let go of the bad. And one thing everyone remembers fondly is their first time behind the wheel of a BMW. So come join me and BMW this summer as we explore pop culture moments and topics you just can't stop thinking about on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, sponsored by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Akela Cooper. She's a writer and producer whose credits include Luke Cage, American Horror Story, Grimm, The 100, Hellfest, and a little 2020 indie movie called Malignant. Welcome to the show.
Hi, hello.
Hey.
Just really quick, it's 2021.
2021.
I know the pandemic has like flattened time. But
Yeah, you said 2020, Mary Beth. That's where we're at.
Literally
right
had it in front of my damn face when I said 2020 because I can't remember. I still think it's 2021. So my 2020 was last year. Like, where am I? It really has flattened time. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to chat with you, particularly about Malignant and your choice of movie, because what wild movies. But before we do that, let's take it back to the start. How did you get introduced to horror?
I got introduced to horror at probably too young an age, I would say, but it happened. I have two older siblings, and I grew up, just something to know about me, I grew up on a farm. And so when you grow up on a farm, and you have older siblings, they become babysitters, essentially free babysitters. And that's what my parents did. My sister is 10 years older than me. And so she was a teenager when I was still a little kid, and she was responsible for watching me, and she enjoyed horror movies, and she would watch them. Like, whether or not she knew I was in the room or around her, like maybe she thought I was outside or whatever. But I remember specifically one day I was home, like I was in the house, and she was watching Hellraiser 2.
Oh, wow.
And I came downstairs, I guess, like considering where I am now, it was the exact right moment. But at the time, it was the wrong moment. It's it was a moment where Julia is brought back from hell. And she comes up out of the mattress without any skin. Yeah, just like me, just like scampering down the stairs, turn a corner. There's a skinless woman coming out of a mattress, and then she eats a dude. And I was like, at the time, I guess I was good about self-censoring because I'm like, nope, I don't need to see this. And I went right back upstairs to my room. I just continued playing. But it was, my sister was also into Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that. So I would watch those. And a lot of times I would catch them as the midday movie, because for Gen Zers and below, there was this thing growing up in the 80s and the 90s called the midday movie, and it was heavily edited, but they would air horror movies. That's how I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 5, the one after Dream Warriors, and Christine, which introduced me to the writings of Stephen King.
Wow. So was Hellraiser 2 your first horror movie? I mean, it was really just a clip, but that was like the first kind of horror you remember watching as a kid?
Yeah, I remember that's the first one that had an effect on me, and I remember the original Nightmare on Elm Street was disturbing, like the scene where Freddy is coming down the alleyway with the extended arms. I would say probably the very first horror movie I watched, and for those, this is a podcast, I just put that in quotes, was John Carpenter's The Thing. Which I am a huge fan of. Like, my dad, who's into science fiction, loved that movie because I guess it was enough science fiction and not horror that he was into it. But yeah, that was an experience where he would put it on. And again, my dad did not give a shit which of his kids was in the room. And I learned which scenes were coming up. So I would like duck behind the couch.
Yep.
And the scenes would play like the scene in the dog kennel, for instance. And I would just listen and imagine, which is kind of worse than seeing it, like imagine what was going on. And then occasionally my dad would like reach behind the couch and like tap me on the head. And it's like the scary part is over. So then I would jump back over the couch and sit and watch. And at a certain point, I just worked my way up to like watching the movie with my dad.
That's amazing.
All the way through. But there's I had I guess very open parents in that regard.
How old were you when you watched The Thing? Do you remember?
Whenever it came out on beta, so it was probably when that movie came out in 1982. So I'm guessing 83, 84. So I would have been really young.
I love that you
said
born in
beta.
81. I was born in 81
Betamax.
too. Me, my first, my birthday is this week. In fact, on Friday. So I love that you're talking about beta because not a lot of people remember beta. Everyone's remembering VHS, right? And so I think it's like a lost, like, legacy of sorts. But I remember having a beta tape player, and the one tape that I owned was a beta of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and I would watch that like non-stop. I loved beta.
We had the beta machine. It had the remote that had the cord. Had to plug in. You had to plug in the remote to the machine to use it.
Yeah, I think I don't even think our beta had like a remote. I remember running over to it and like pressing the buttons on the actual. Yeah, we had eventually like it wore out. But like my beta watch, oddly enough, was Child's Play. Oh, okay.
I came to love that movie, and that was like, as a kid, there's a certain point where you're like, I can operate the video machine. I can operate it by myself. And Child's Play was the one that I would always put on. Like at a certain point, like my parents upgraded to VHS. And so the beta machine got put in like our little like rec room area with the old TV. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go watch my own thing. And it's like Child's Play. I love Chucky from a very young age, and I don't know why.
Did that movie ever scare you?
But that was my go-to. The ending kind of scared me after she threw him in the fire, and then he comes out as that like charred and I remember like him just walking and stalking, and like he only had the one eye. That image frightened me, but everything else about Chucky I just thought was funny.
So it sounds like you kind of were introduced to horror movies at a very young age. And I know that it sounds like you self-censored to the point where like you would hide when you knew something scary was happening. Did horror movies as a whole scare you, or was it just when you were first starting out?
Horror movies as a whole scare me. I enjoy like a good scare. I think like the last movie that really got under my skin was Hereditary. And it's that one shot we all know where you go from like bright light to dark teen bedroom, and there's something in the corner. I'm like, that was fucking brilliant. I'm just like, I'm probably gonna dream about that tonight. Fuck. But it's gonna be wonderful. Yeah. And then like before that, I think one of the big ones was like the Paranormal Activity movies, because it just hit something so primal, which is what happens when we're asleep in our houses.
Yeah.
And like that's something that anyone can relate to. But yeah, it's like growing up, it's like, you know, the slasher films of the 80s, which we'll get to it, but like influenced Malignant heavily. And then I was a huge fan of like the 90s horror resurgence for teens that started with Scream and then The Craft and Urban Legend and all of those movies.
Hell yeah.
Which weren't necessarily scary, but they were fun.
They were
and then
fun.
like the late aughts, one of the ones that really blew me away, as problematic as the director is, which came to find out later, Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah.
That was one I went to see with my friends at theaters when we were in college and just like wasn't expecting much of that movie. But then I saw it and I was like, holy shit, this is really good. And like there's some awesome horror imagery in that. So yeah.
The final shot of that is still really horrifying.
Oh my God. It is because, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, it's like, you know the horror movie tropes, which is that like once the sun comes up, everything is going to be fine, and you know our heroes and our heroines are going to get away and they're going to be safe and yada yada yada. And that is not what happens. That is not what happens at all. The dude you think is Justin Long, or it is Justin Long, but you think he's going to be the hero and slay the monster, and he gets flown away to this dark, dank hole out in the middle of nowhere and basically gutted and skinned, and the monster wins.
Just hold
out. And I just remember being like, shit! Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this, okay, Jeepers Creepers, I fucks with you. I really do.
We discovered how terrible the director is.
Yeah, that whole thing with Victor Salva, it was just like, whew, okay.
Pivoting a little bit. But so what draws you to horror now as an adult?
I like that horror is like one of the genres that's almost guaranteed to evoke an emotion in people. Drama is kind of hit or miss. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Like you really have to have a personal investment in what's going on with like movies that are straight genre. Comedy, usually you're going to find something to laugh at. Like everyone can find something to laugh at, even in the stupidest movies. And horror is kind of the same as comedy. It's like some things scare some people, some things don't. And I like finding those things that make people react and get that emotional investment into the story. And then you're caught off guard by something terrifying that happens. And then you're just left talking about it afterwards and wondering, you know, like Paranormal Activity. It's like, what does go on in my house? Do I want to see the video footage of my bedroom when I'm sleeping?
Right.
Nah, I don't. I'm just going to assume all the movement.
Sometimes.
It is. It really is. I'm just going to assume all the movement is my cats. That's it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, you have cats. Love that.
I don't need to know. But yeah. It's just, and horror it's this shared experience that's like cathartic for people to like be terrified, get scared shitless, and then laugh about it. Especially, you know, obviously we're going on year 3 of a pandemic, so it's kind of hard to have these shared experiences in a theater. But like in a movie theater, it's a lot of fun for everybody to like scream and jump and then laugh.
Yeah.
It's that like tension and release that you get with horror that I love, and I'm happy to invoke those emotions in the audience.
Hell yeah.
What's your favorite theater going experience with a horror movie? I love hearing about everyone's favorite.
Oh, theater going. Paranormal Activity was a lot of fun. Like off the top of my head. It's also, I have to say, it's like it's Los Angeles, so it was a lot of like Catholic people in the audience. Like it was heavily Catholic, I'll say that. And so everyone was like praying and screaming, and like as we were leaving the theater, people they were talking about like going home and like saging their house and doing like everything like that. That was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, okay, all right. It was that one. I have to say, I got to see Malignant in theaters at Beyond Fest. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that must have been incredible. I wish I had seen Malignant in a theater, because, oh boy.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm trying to, like, Paranormal Activity. Like, cool. I'm probably missing something.
You'd brought up Hereditary, and that is one of my favorite theater going experiences, because the scene that you're talking about with her perched up on the wall, listening to the gasps as people around the audience starts to like realize what's going on, and everyone's seeing it at different times. Those moments you can't replicate.
Best. Oh, so
that was. I went with a bunch of. I have like a group of horror friends. And we are like the only people we can go to a horror movie with because all of our other friends are like, nope. And yeah, we were in the theater, and you have like the husband catches fire, everything is like super bright, and then you cut to the bedroom and your eyes have to adjust.
Yep.
And so I was sitting next to my friend Ray, and Ray just goes and pokes me. Like, I'm like, what? And he's like, and I looked at the corner, I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, oh shit. And then my friend next to me is like, what? And it's exactly like you're saying. It's like everyone starts reacting and your eyes completely adjust. And it's like, she's in the corner of the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
Oh God. And then she did that little spider crab walk thing out.
Yes.
And we were all just like, ah, oh God.
It's the fucking worst and the best at the same time, but also just like,
I was like, all right, yep. But then you get to like people cults. And it kind of just becomes funny. I'm sorry. Naked old people are funny to me.
Okay, so let's talk about your creative side. How did you get interested, and how did you get involved with like writing screenplays and producing and all the kind of creative stuff that you've done over the last, however long it's been? You've done a lot.
Yeah, I think it's probably like 2009 is when I got my first TV writing gig, and then 2011 on Grimm is when I had my first produced credit. So yeah.
Wow.
holy shit, wow.
How did you get introduced to that, or how did you get interested in it? Has it been something that you've been interested all your life?
It was. Originally, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I always knew that is what I enjoyed. Like, I was that kid in school who loved reading. Like, a lot of times when you finish your work early and your teacher is like, we have to give you pointless busy work. We can't just let you sit there and stare out the window and fantasize about a better life. I would always read a book as opposed to like do the times table or whatever worksheets that they had. Whereas other kids were just like, oh God, I don't want to read. I'm like, I'll do it. I'll take the book.
Give me those books.
And I just enjoyed like how words formed into sentences that were paragraphs that became stories. And you could essentially do whatever you wanted to. So in a book. So initially I thought I was going to be a literary author, and then ended up going to grad school at USC. And got introduced to like to screenwriting because I was into movies, and I knew at a certain point I wanted to also write movies. I thought I was going to do the Michael Crichton thing, where I was like, I would write a novel and it would get optioned, and then I'd be like, I'm going to write the screenplay.
Okay.
Like, that was as a freshman in college, that was my goal. And then I was like, you know what, let me just go to USC. Cause I was working as a substitute teacher, after graduating, but I wasn't really, like while I was looking for a job, I was like, I could just also go to grad school, which is what my teachers at undergrad, encouraged us to do. And it's like, it's just what you want to do. And it's like, okay, so I can go to a school where I can just focus on the subjects that I like, which are reading and writing. And I don't have to worry about calculus or physics or any of that other stuff to get my degree. Great. And I applied to USC not thinking I was going to get in, and I got in.
Wow.
And then I came out here, and I did the graduate program at USC, learned like the formatting of like writing scripts from professional people. Because at like trying my hand earlier at scripts, I would basically just go to Barnes and Nobles, and they had like the little movie section. And so I would buy like scripts, like you could get like produced movie scripts, and I would read those and then just like mimic what I saw in those scripts. And a lot of my early pre-USC scripts were really shitty, but you got to start somewhere.
Yes, you do.
And so, yeah, USC was great with structure and like character work, and getting into that. And while I was there, it just so happened that they had a nascent TV program that they were building. And I'm like, I also like television. And I didn't know that this was a thing that people could do steadily. And so from there, I got into the CBS Writers Workshop for television. And got my first show gig as a research assistant on a little cult hit called Jericho.
Oh.
Whoa, cool.
And so that was a really great experience because this was back when like TV shows were filmed in Los Angeles. So we were in the Valley, and our sets were there, and post was there, as well as the writer's room. So it was a great 360 education. When I wasn't needed in the room,
Oh, yeah, wow.
I would hang out on set. And when they weren't filming and I wasn't in the room, I just walked over to post and just started introducing myself to the editors, and they just let me hang out in their editing bay while they worked. And I'm like, okay. So like, this is nice. And yeah, that was my start in television. And so I worked in TV for a couple of years, and by the time I got to Luke Cage, I had that itch to work in features again. So season 1 of Luke Cage, I made a point to just like write 2 features, and we sent those out as essentially like a calling card, hoping we were going to sell it. It did sell. But one of those scripts got me my meeting with the lovely gentleman at Atomic Monster, Michael Clear and Judson Scott. And so we all hit it off because I don't know if people know this, but finding executives who actually like genre, especially horror in this business, is very hard.
Yeah.
Like a lot of executives look down on horror and look down on genre, even today, like as the redheaded stepchild that nobody wants to deal with, but that redheaded stepchild brings in millions upon millions of dollars steadily. So finding 2 executives who were like, no, we fucking love this. And we were just like talking about like all of the 80s horror movies that we loved. And those 2 guys had, it's like, okay, we like you. We like your writing. James and we have been kicking around this idea that at the time, I think they kind of pitched me as like Chopping Mall meets Child's Play, which I hadn't seen Chopping Mall in a really long time, but I was a fan of Child's Play.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, yeah, like I'll, noodle on it a little bit and see what I come up with. And they sent me like this really thin paragraph, which is basically like, here's what we talked about and here's just what we want, which was, Child's Play, but instead of the supernatural, it was artificial intelligence. I'm like, okay.
Oh.
So that then became the idea for Megan, which I pitched to them and they liked. And then we took it to Blumhouse and they liked it. And Blumhouse partnered with Atomic Monster. And we ended up bringing on a director, Gerard Johnstone, who's really, really awesome. He did Housebound, the New Zealand horror movie.
Great movie.
And so Megan was the first movie that I wrote for Atomic Monster. And then that led to, I did a good job on that. So they were like, hey, James and his fiance at the time, Ingrid, like they have an idea that they want to run by you. And I was like, okay, what is it? And that was Malignant, which Ingrid had done like a lot of research on teratomas and all of that stuff. And it turns out, it just so happened, I'm like, I knew exactly what she was talking about because I'd had a friend who'd experienced that. When she was a teenager, they thought she had cancer. She didn't have cancer. The tumor was actually the twin that she had absorbed in the womb that was growing. And I'm like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. I have secondhand personal experience with this. And so, yeah, they had like a 3-page I think it was like a 3-page treatment with all of the big ideas, including the reveal. And then I took that and basically built upon it. And we bounced it around between us. And then they were like, we like this. So they brought me on to write Malignant. And after Malignant, they were like, hey, we want to call you in to do this other thing. And I was like, okay, what is it? And that ended up being The Nun 2 with New Line and Warner Brothers. So I've done 3 movies with Atomic Monster. And yeah, hopefully all of them will be made. Malignant's been made. Megan's been made. Fingers crossed for The Nun 2, which is all I can say. Which is not a bad fingers crossed, but I know things that I can't say.
That's amazing. I was going to ask, I was curious about Megan because I did notice it was on your IMDb page and it looked like it's maybe coming out in 2022. So I was like, I hope that is because
Allison Williams starring.
Yeah. And when you said, Child's Play and Chopping Mall, when I was reading this, I was like, okay, this sounds like kind of like robots in a chopping mall, but with like kind of the Chucky thing. And I was like, I'm here for it. So that's amazing. Okay. Yeah. I have to ask, what was it like working with James on developing this story?
It was a lot of fun. It's like it's kind of easy because James knows exactly what he wants, as does Ingrid. And so, yeah, it was basically like taking all of the bits that they had and just fleshing it out. Cause they had the tentpole scenes. Right. That they knew that they wanted. And then it was like building the story off of that and bringing in like fleshing out the cops and the sister dynamic and that stuff. But yeah, it's basically, it was, I wrote my draft and then James and Ingrid and Judson and Michael gave me notes, did the notes, sent it back to them. And then typically what happens in features is like the director, in this case, James Wan, is like, thank you for your service. I'm going to take it from here. And then James did his pass on the script, filling in all of the stuff that he wanted. So yeah, it's like my job was relatively easy with that.
Wow.
Cool.
I I'm curious about the inspirations for Malignant and what you guys were kind of working on with it. Because like when I'm watching it, I can see like some Argento influences in there. Basket Case, obviously, with like the kind of deformed twin aspect of it. And like I also watching it, I was kind of struck by like the feel of like the aughts Castle remakes with like Particular House on Haunted Hill with the giant kind of asylum like institution that's like up on the hill overlooking like the cliff and stuff. So I'm kind of curious what inspirations you drew from when you were writing the script.
Well, the two biggest were the ones that James gave me. It was The Eyes of Laura Mars meets The Dark Half is what he wanted.
Oh, okay.
So then I watched those. Like I'd seen The Dark Half, but hadn't seen it in a really long time. And I'm a fan of Stephen King, so that was easy. And then I hadn't seen The Eyes of Laura Mars, so that was new. And that was fun to pull from. And then the other big influence was essentially the movie Seven, which is where we get the chase sequence from. And so making that like the tight, tense chase sequence that it was.
I hadn't even thought about how similar those chase sequences are, because I love the chase sequence in Malignant, and I love Seven. That's so cool.
Yeah, that was basically James. It's like, I want it to be like the chase scene with John Doe in Seven. I'm like, gotcha. And it's always great when your job is watching movies and reading scripts. But yeah, I basically took all of my cues from James with what he wanted us to pull from, and then like just sarcastic. Like I'd worked on Grimm and Luke Cage, so I kind of had a little bit of the procedural experience and just like the sarcastic banter with the cops and their relationships. I just pulled from stuff that I'd already like, Luke and Misty conversations kind of. But yeah, like those were the influences.
Okay, so I also have to. I'm curious because when you were talking about when you were going through kind of your career, one of the questions I had about that was, what was it like being in the writers' room writing TV? Because I feel like that's a lot different than a lot of feature film screenwriters have to go through, where it's very solitary. I mean, in this case, it wasn't, but a lot of times it's a solitary experience, at least in the start. Whereas when you're working with it on a team, I'm curious about how that feels with all the kind of creative energy flowing in the writers' room.
I love it. I love being in a writer's room. I love being with a bunch of smart people because you feel like it's not all on you. Whereas with features, it's like, and even with Malignant, it was like I had the tent poles and I had the influences, but it's like, you go write this now.
Right.
I'm the one who was just like, I have to write Gabriel's dialogue, and as a horror movie fan, I know this is going to be silly at a certain point. The more he talks and the more he says. So that was a tightrope to walk. Whereas like in a writer's room, I could have just bounced in there and been like, yo, okay, so we have a killer that's talking out of the back of this woman's head. How much is too much dialogue, y'all? Let's like, and then we would just like sit in there and like act it out with each other. And it's like, okay, that's too much. Whereas, yeah, with like writing Malignant, like at home on my computer, it's like, it's just me and my cats, and my cats are just going to be like, meow. I'm not going to get, but I also, it's like you trust that like it's James Wan. So it's like, James is going to let me know if this is too much. And then at some point, James is going to take the draft and he's going to, do his pass and what he wants Gabriel to say. And that's how it's going to end up. But yeah, like back to your question, like I love television. It's just like, it's being in a room, hopefully with like really, really smart people, and you're having fun creating story and talking about these characters. And a lot of times it's like you have this camaraderie because like if you have a really good writer's room where everyone trusts everyone, you're all bringing like personal aspects of your lives to these stories, and you get to know people like in really intimate, like emotionally intimate ways. And so yeah, and then it's like you're assigned your episode and you go off and write your episode. Some people like to write at home, or you can like write in the office if you need to. And yeah, if like you need a break, like go hang out in the writer's room. Like there was a time I did Witches of East End. And I remember like I had to be in the office working on something because like something was happening in my apartment complex. But like when I hit a wall on something, I walked in the writer's room and it's like, hey, can I borrow your brains for a moment? And then they took time out of their, story breaking to help me. And then it's like, oh yes, that. and then you walk back and, you know, you finish the job. So it's really nice to have that. And I think it's like for the feature people, it's a lot of, you know, like writers groups that people have that they get feedback on. But like collectively, when you can talk something out with someone who's not you, it's also offering like a lot of different perspectives. And like, even what I learned, my very first show was V on ABC. The remake.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bell, who is our showrunner, was like, I was the staff writer, so I didn't want to say anything because I'm like, I don't want to pitch it because it might be stupid. And he was like, there are no stupid ideas, because a stupid idea might cause someone else in the room to think of something that's a good idea. So just say it and we'll talk about it and see where it goes. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I've taken that with me. But yeah, I love being in writers' rooms. I love TV. Cat.
Sorry,
We have a
sorry,
cat.
my cat decided. One of my cats decided to say
show
hi.
everybody his butthole.
Oh yeah, she's like, look at my butt. Oh, is she hanging up here? Yeah. Sorry, she loves
cat
to
is
make an
asleep.
appearance on all the podcasts.
See, here's the thing. Like when I was doing like Zoom writers' rooms, I invested in a cat hammock.
A cat hammock.
Oh, those are. I love the. Oh, I love the
Sam.
Sam.
Yep. So my Riker is up there. That's my boy cat. My girl cat is running around here somewhere, Row.
Oh.
But yeah, because they were all like always on my keyboard. It's like, I got to put you guys someplace where you feel like you're in authority,
Right.
but you're not in my
involved
way.
and-
But you're not in my way. Yeah. So I'm curious about like the reaction from like the studio about the script. Like, were they okay
I have no
with
idea.
how? Okay. Oh, cool. So you were just like, hey, you didn't have to do it. Cool.
That was all on James at that point. And like the internet
okay.
joke is that like Aquaman had made $1 billion at that point. I don't think Warner Brothers really said anything.
That I know that's what we always
I've
joke
made
about.
that,
I'm like,
I've made that joke
they, like,
many times on Twitter.
he made
no.
Aquaman and they gave him the credit card and was just like, you can do whatever you want.
He made
And then he
$1.4
made
billion. Go have fun.
Essentially, he was like, this is my patches project. I want to get this in between Aquaman 2. They're like, have at it.
That's
amazing.
awesome.
And so what was your personal favorite moment that you wrote or like in the entire film of Malignant? Because there are so many choices. So I'm curious, like what you loved the most to write in the film.
My favorite line in the movie comes from Regina when like they've done the sketch of what Madison has seen, and she's like, "So I'm putting out a bolo on Sloth from Goonies."
Yes.
I didn't think that was gonna stay in the script.
It's such
It
a
was
great
one of those things that I was
line.
like, it made me laugh when I wrote it, because that was a day where I'm just like, she's got to say something funny here, and I'm not a comedian. I will fully admit that, and like my sense of humor is like situational. It's like it's one of those you have to be in it. So I'm just like, okay, she's got to say something. She's got to say something here, and it's got to be funny, right? It's like, what can Sloth from the Goonies? I don't know, because I didn't even know what the sketch was going to look like.
Right.
It doesn't look like Sloth from the Goonies, but
But
so I was
it
like,
works.
oh, that line stayed in there. And then I think like was like as it like building on the tentpole reveal that James and Ingrid had, which was like the police station beat where Gabriel reveals himself, and just writing that and like making sure in the script I'm like, and to be clear, she is now moving backwards. She is fully in reverse. And I'm talking to James, and it's like, he's gonna know what that is. I'm like, who am I writing those instructions? Anyways, for the people reading, so that everyone knows what's going on. But just describing the mayhem, because again, I'm like, at a certain point with action beats, unless you, I guess, are gonna direct it and like you want to put all that in there, I tend to just like overview stuff. And then I was like, the stunt coordinator and the director are gonna take it from here. So the description of the police melee, so to speak, was basically after Gabriel reveals himself. It's like all hell breaks loose, and then it becomes a hurricane of blood and guts. I'm like, do with that what you will, James. And he did.
And they
And he
sure
did.
fucking did. Oh my god. My favorite is when Zoe Bell's character yells, "What the fuck?" This is in the prison cell. What the fuck?
I got to visit set that day too, so that was a lot of fun.
I was going to ask, were you able to like be on set while this was being filmed and what that was like? Because that scene, so good.
To visit set twice. I got to visit set for that scene, and I got to visit set for some of the hospital asylum stuff, which they actually filmed in an abandoned asylum.
Did
and
they really?
I got lost. Like
Oh
looking
my
for
God.
like one of the producers I was looking for was like in the B unit. And so I was walking around and one of the signs that they put up around, it's like, hey, this is where Video Village is, or this is where catering is, or like it got turned around.
Oh, shit.
And so I went down the wrong hallway and I passed by the morgue.
That's
and
the
I
start
came
of
to,
a
like,
horror
just-
movie right there.
Yes. And it was like a dead end. And then there was like another turn where I walked outside and I'm just like, I have no idea where I am in relationship to everything else in this place. So let me go back through this gauntlet one more time. And it just kept my eyes straight. It's like, don't look in any of, there were rooms. It was like, there were rooms and then morgue and then stairs.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, just stay straight. No, I eventually did find them, but yeah, it was like a very tense 5 minutes of my life in that abandoned asylum.
Wow. I can only imagine just walking me like, don't look in the rooms. Because it's sort of like that sort of paranormal activity thing of like, do I want to know? I don't want to know what's on there. If I don't see it, I'm okay. Just walk straight.
Because one of them I did glance into, and it was a bed that had been like the bed frame, which was like metal coil and all that stuff, just like against the wall. It's like,
No.
It's like, but as a horror writer, I'm like, I'm filing this away, but I'm going to make it out of this alive first.
Wow.
Okay, so Akela, we've talked about your incredible career, but what movie did you bring with you today?
The movie that I brought that scarred me for life is Pumpkinhead, directed by Stan Winston and written by Mark Carducci and Gary Girani. Hopefully I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Based on a poem by Ed Justin,
Yes.
which not that many
Right?
people know.
So, quick synopsis for Pumpkinhead for those of you unfamiliar. After a tragic accident, a man conjures up a towering, vengeful demon named Pumpkinhead to destroy a group of unsuspecting teenagers.
All right.
So, okay, Akela,
Yes.
tell us your scarred for life story. I want to hear all about when you first saw Pumpkinhead, how it messed you up. Like, paint us a horror picture.
And I will. This is not the first time I've told this story, and it won't be the last. So, Pumpkinhead got like I didn't know this at the time, but like contextually, it got like a very small theatrical release.
Yeah.
Like a few like small local theaters for whatever reason, and one of those theaters was near my hometown.
Oh.
And my parents heard about the movie, and they went to see it. And my parents, again, aren't like big horror people. I don't know what they thought it was. But they came back and they were raving about the movie. Like, they loved it. And they loved it so much that, like, my brother wanted to go see it because he was also into horror. He's like, I want to go see it. And, you'll take me and his BFF at the time. And so everyone was talking about how much they love this movie and how great it was and blah, 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 blah. And me, I think, like, Pumpkinhead came out in, 87? So I was
88, I believe.
88. So I was 7 years old
Wow.
when this was in theaters. 7. And all of the adults and my tweenage brother, no, he would have been a teenager at that point, like, were just talking about it, and they went to see it that next weekend. And I wanted to go, and they were like, no, it's too scary for you. You can't see it. And so the plan was to drop me off at my grandmother's house. And they dropped me off at my grandmother's house, and I remember standing with my grandmother, and we're just in the doorway, and we're waving goodbye to them as they pull away. And then I see brake lights, and the car backs up, and my brother gets out, and he comes running up to me, and he's like, come on. and they took me. Now,
Wow.
cut to years later, I finally asked my mom, I'm like, hey, why did you change your mind and send my brother to come get me? And she was like, I saw you and you looked so sad
Oh.
at being left behind. It broke my heart. So I decided to take you.
Oh. That's sweet.
Oh.
Yes. So cut back to, me, apparently completely and horribly dejected 7-year-old. And my mom is like, I can't do this. We have to take her to see this scary ass movie. Go get her. So we go to the theater, and we get our popcorn and previews of what they were, in the 80s. I don't think there were that many. And then the movie starts. And if you've seen the movie, it starts with a flashback of Lance Henriksen's character as a child in this Ozark-like, or Appalachian, I think it's the Appalachians, hut.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, basically it's like poor white Appalachian people in the 1950s. And tension right off the bat. Something's wrong. Like, the father is like, I got to put the horses up. Y'all stay in bed. I got to lock the door because Pumpkinhead's going to be out tonight. And then there's some noise, and then the little boy is like, Mama, what's going on? And it's like, nothing, honey, nothing we can do about it. And then they just smash cut to this dude running for his fucking life. And you hear the sound of cicadas, whatever. I'm from the South. I don't one of those pronunciations is right. Which, again, I grew up with, so I'm very familiar with that sound.
Oh yeah, me too.
And so there's just like a cacophony of them on the soundtrack as this dude is running. He's been beaten up and he's bleeding, and he trips, and then something huge pulls him off of the ground, and then you cut back to Lance Henriksen's childhood home, and the dad is sitting in the chair with a shotgun, and I'm just like, what is going on? I don't think I like this. And so then, not to do the whole thing, but at some point, little Lance Henriksen looks out the window and sees the silhouette of Pumpkinhead holding this man. Mm-hmm. And just that glimpse was like, okay. So then I turn to my mother, terrified, and she picks me up and puts me in her lap.
Oh.
And I proceed to watch the movie essentially from my mother's armpit.
I love that.
I watch the non-scary scenes, and then Pumpkinhead comes on, and I just like turn and shove my head between her boob and her arm. I can still hear everything that's going on. So my mind is filling in blanks. Yep. And at one point I do remember in the theater, it was the scene where Pumpkinhead finds them at the church, because the hillbilly boy thinks that going to the church will like be what saves them, or like Pumpkinhead can't enter the church, and then he does.
Yes, he sure does
enter the church. And it's just
yes.
Walking, and it's just like, I remember seeing that, and then the other two moments that stuck with me that I did not watch from my mom's armpit. And this is also what terrified me about Pumpkinhead, because a lot of times monsters in the 80s were just like these mindless cretins, with the exception of Freddy. But Freddy was a human being, so that made sense that he was self-aware and, had smarts. So Pumpkinhead sets up a motorbike, basically, for the protagonist to be like, oh shit, there's a vehicle that I can get to, that I can like get out of here on, and I can go get help. And so he carefully approaches this motorbike, and he gets on, and he's trying to like start it, and then out of nowhere, a 7-foot demon from hell. It's like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. It's like, how did you sneak up there, sir?
He's so stealthy, and then just brah.
He really is. But like, all of a sudden, you just see Pumpkinhead with the bike chain or whatever.
You sure
on his finger, mockingly being like, "Hey, boy!" And that's when I was like, "Smart." Oh no! If you encounter this monster, it's like there's not going to be just like run and hide. He's going to trick you, and that got me. And then when the hillbilly boy who was trying to help them is hiding in Lance Henriksen's home, and he's in the closet.
And poor Gypsy's in the little toy chest.
Yes, and she's in the toy chest, and like he thinks hiding behind the clothes, Pumpkinhead is not going to see him, and then Pumpkinhead does the thing where he turns away like he's going to leave, like, yeah, you fooled him, and then turns right back around,
surprise,
pulls the clothes aside, and just gets in his face, like, come on now, man, I see you. And it's just like, oh no, like blew my wee little brain. I also remember seeing, and this, I don't know if this was like in theater or like, because again, my parents got this on beta when it came out. when he took the religious girl's head and like just shoved it in the window and was just like window washing with her face before he pushed her through. It's like, it's so sadistic, and you hadn't, again, outside of Freddy, you hadn't seen that, because like Michael Myers he's always the shark. He's like, or I know there's like questioning about that, but like he's a single-minded, I am going to kill these teenagers and get Laurie Strode.
Yep.
And then Jason are there teens fucking? There are teens fucking. I'm going to go stabby stab now. To have a movie monster that wasn't human, but then again, that's the twist at the end, which I also thought was like super cool. Turns out, spoiler alert, they were human.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautifully tragic in a way that in order to stop this, Lance Henriksen's character has to fulfill the cycle and essentially die so that the current Pumpkinhead can go back to hell, I guess. And then he becomes the new one, which is like, all this man wanted was vengeance for his son.
It's such a
and
sad
it led
movie.
to his death too. It is. He sold his soul basically, tragically. But yeah, there are so many good moments in that movie. There's also when the 80s asshole in the leather jacket like goes outside and is like, I'm the one that you want.
Yes.
You start hearing cicadas coming inside the house, and then he goes back in and like there's light coming through the door into the kitchen, and then like a second later Pumpkinhead just steps in there, and it's just like, even to this day sometimes I'm like, I know it's coming, and I still jump when he comes in there.
It's
and
a great
like
moment.
When the trio of women are in the kitchen and the girl like grabs the knives and she's like, just in case Jesus doesn't show.
Right.
And then she turns away from the window and Pumpkinhead like walks past the window because he's been waiting for her to like not be looking so he could sneak across. It's just like, holy shit.
I love that you bring up that you keep bringing up Freddy when you're talking about this, because like Freddy was a catty bitch, and Pumpkinhead seems like a catty bitch. Like, the way
the dangling, it's like, hey,
that chain, the fact that the religious girl gets like the cross like scrape like cut into her forehead, and then she, like you said, pushed against the glass, and then he just kind of pushes her into the thing like, hey, you forgot this. I'm just going to give this back to you. Like, a lot of his actions just feel like either like a cat, like he feels like a giant cat that's like having so much fun tormenting its people before he kills it, or like just a catty little bitch. Because the things that he does are so taunting, are so mean, are so like sort of like, I could kill you. Like, I am like so tall, I could just slash your throat. But no, I'm going to play with you a little bit.
I'm going to climb up a tree, wait for your friends to come outside, and then drop you expertly on a rock.
We're gonna midsummer you.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to do. And when he kills the 80s douchebag, he like just, it's the King Kong moment. And Roy Woodruff Jr. acknowledged like that. Stan was like, you got to do the King Kong moment where he's just like playing with his head.
Yes, that moment too when he's killed. Well, I love that he grabs the gun and you're like, oh wow, is he gonna shoot him? That's weird. Nope, he's just gonna jab it into him.
Just jab
it,
which comes after he's played dead. He's like, he's not dead.
Yes!
Boom, shoots him in the head. He's like, he's dead now. And then he grabs his ankle and is like, no, I'm not.
Nah.
And I know how guns, and I kind of know how guns work. I don't shoot you, but I kind of know how to grab one and just shove it inside of you.
Shove it in you.
But I will say Pumpkinhead today still looks incredible.
Oh.
Yes, it does.
Like, that creature design is absolutely incredible. And he's still terrifying.
He is. He is my favorite.
Good. It's so good. I always forget how much I love it. 'Cause, like, I saw this for the first time last year. And I was so, like, well, one, I knew about this movie and was always wondering why he didn't actually have a pumpkin head. I was like, but he doesn't have a pumpkin for a head. Why does he call it Pumpkinhead? Because
he comes from the old pumpkin patch.
That incredible set. But then watching it, I was just so amazed with how good he looks. I'm like, are you sure he's not a real thing in this world that is hiding like in the shadows? Because holy shit, like it holds up so well.
And that was actually the first time, I think it was the first time, because everyone assumes that like Stan Winston designed that because Stan Winston directed the movie, but that was when he turned it over to his crew. Basically, it was like, hey, I'm not going to supervise this really. Like, show me what you got. And this is what they came up with. And yeah, it is absolutely freaking terrifying. Like, if I walked out of this room and I saw that in my living room, I'm going to have a heart attack.
You're not going to laugh.
No, I am not going to laugh. I am going to fall on the floor dead.
Oh my God. Okay. So I love hearing people's stories about seeing these movies as a kid. This was a favorite of mine growing up. I never saw it in the movie theater. I lived in Alaska. It never came anywhere near there, but it was a favorite on VHS for me. And I remember really watching it over and over again. And I'll be honest, I haven't seen it since I was a kid. And so this rewatch was quite wild for me because I realized I didn't remember anything about the actual story of the movie. I just remember the specific scenes of Pumpkinhead. I remember the little kid, poor Billy, that gets killed because I looked kind of like Billy. I had like sort of like blonde hair. I had these big glasses. Like I kind of nerdy. I was Billy as a little kid. And so watching it, I was like, oh my gosh. I remember why this movie kind of terrified me as a kid, and yet I couldn't stop watching it. But I do remember Billy. I remember Billy's death. I remember the image of the witch, which I want to talk about for sure.
I mean, my God, that's great makeup.
Oh, right? I remember the climax a little bit. I particularly remember Ed getting pierced by the pitchfork and that being like they're connected type of moment.
Yeah.
But like, when I was watching this, it's like, I have no recollection of about 90% of this movie. It was like watching it for the first time. It was so weird to me.
Oh, the actual, like the first moment I think for the audience though, is when it's after the King Kong moment, the dog bites Ed.
Mm-hmm. And then
then you see Pumpkinhead like, ah! So for the audience, we're just like, wait, what? And then, the pitchfork is just like, oh, I have to kill myself because I was the one who conjured this thing. Like that damn sneaky witch forgot to tell me got to read the fine print.
Conveniently left out that part. It was just like, it's going to take a toll on you. Like, love that good cryptic message of just like, something bad's going to happen, but you don't know what. And it's like, oh, just kidding. You are Pumpkinhead now. Surprise.
Yeah. It was like when he goes back the second time and asks her to stop it, it's like, nothing I can do. It's got to run its course now.
Ed Holly.
The way she says his name.
Holly. But it was like, God damn you. And he's like, he already has, son. He already has.
Oh my God.
Like, that was also because, like, flashback moment in my mom's lap, like, when she conjured the thing, like when he brought it to her and she did that ritual, like even the moment when you hear the bones snap.
Yeah.
And like the first movement, I was like, no, I don't like whatever this is. And I would like peek and then like it stands up as it's like fully grown. And again, the sound of the cicadas. Cause like I sometimes, in summer we would sleep with like our windows open and you would just hear those sounds. And I'm just like, is he in the backyard? Wait, no, I have done nothing wrong. I have done nothing wrong. Why would Pumpkinhead be in my backyard? Stop it. Go to sleep.
Okay, so I have to wonder, because so you watched the movie and you were terrified watching the movie. Did it affect you afterwards? I mean, you just kind of mentioned a little bit like the cicada thing. But did
my mother, tried to do the right thing by including me. It just resulted in me sleeping in bed with my parents for like a week, maybe 2 weeks. I could not. It's like I would wake up and then be like, I hear cicadas or there's something, and just like book it out of my room down to their room and just like do the dive before the monster could grab me. Just like nuzzle up between them under the covers and go to sleep. Like it was at least a week sleeping in the room because like I would dream about Pumpkinhead.
Oh my God. Well, I wanted to go back to talking about how this is a tragic movie because, again, first time I watched it, I got that. But this time especially, I really was, like, watching the relationship between Ed and his little boy and how it's a super tender relationship that you don't see a lot in movies. I feel like that relationship between father and son that's like super affectionate and loving is so hard to see. And like right from the jump, they're so close and they love each other so much. And then the way that this kid is like immediately killed in the most vicious way, I feel like getting a motorcycle to the head is just so fucking sad. And like, it's all like, you think it like sounds like it'd be funny, but you're like, oh no, this is horrendous. Like, this is going to go so poorly for everybody involved. With his glasses. And then the scene where he's holding his son and the kid goes, daddy, and then goes limp. I was like, this is fucking sad.
It took me a while to realize that's what had happened. Because, like, there are things that you miss on, like, beta and VHS. And so one day I was like, I think I had the volume up or something. And I heard, daddy. And then he died. Because I always thought he just died on the hill.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's like he died in his dad's arms. And that's just like a whole other color on the movie when you try to understand why Ed did what he did. But yeah, it's like it's so tender and loving. And there's that moment where like he's washing his son's hands and talking about like having that relationship with his grandmother, which my grandmother, like, to make sure I wash my hands, would like either hold me like up over the sink or like would get like a little bin and wash my hands too. So I'm just like, I understand that feeling of having like an older woman whose hands are like super wrinkly, just like in yours. And it's like, so yeah, that always got me. I was like, that's what my grandma does. It's really, yeah. And it was just like, oh man. But I think like I remember my brother's best friend, we were talking about it on the way home, or they were talking about it on the way home. I was very quiet and listening. One of the scenes the scene that actually scared him was when Ed is, I guess, coming back from the witch, and he pulls over because he's so grief stricken, and then the boy sits up and it's like, what did you do, daddy? And it's just like, it's a jump scare, but it's an effective jump scare. Yeah, it's just like, also it's like going towards that guilt. But yeah, that was like, oh god, we have our zombies in this movie now. Holy shit.
Well, like I got big Pet Cemetery vibes this time, especially when he sits up like as underneath, like he's just in the truck under a quilt, which is, you know, absolutely fucking upsetting. And he sits up, and obviously you have him going to that pumpkin graveyard, which again, so cool, and has this like weird like this like not whimsical, but like almost like fantasy kind of vibe to it. Like it feels like it should be more fantastical than they frame it. But, you know, you have him digging up this thing to bring to not bring his son back to life, but, you know, get revenge. And then the son sits up and you're like, ooh, this is so gross. Like this is like Pet Cemetery, but somehow worse. Like, think about if he did Pet Cemetery but got revenge against the truck driver. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I would watch that very much.
Yeah, the set design, and the thing is like having, you know, grown up in a small town in the South, something that like city folk might not get is like, I like when you watch the movie, they don't explain the culture, it just is, where it's like, yeah, no, it's like you gotta go into the back of the old pumpkin patch. And the way people talk about the old pumpkin patch,
right,
you're not supposed to fucking go back there. Like, I grew up with those, like, yeah, there are areas of the woods, you don't go. Just don't do it.
Don't ask questions about why either. Just don't go back there. And you don't question it.
You do not do it.
And you do not question it. You're like, nope, I will not go back there. I don't want to find out like what the fuck is back there. I've watched enough horror movies. I know what happens when you go to the forbidden part of the woods.
Yeah, we all do. It's like, yep, nope, I'm good.
So
to this day, I'm just like, when people are like, hey, I remember in college, there was this place it was like the Boot Factory. It was the college town where I lived in at one point had a boot factory. It closed and it was abandoned, and you could see it on the hill. Like you could see it.
Oh,
and like at night, very creepy. One of my early horror movies was set at that boot factory. And I remember like one day, like my friends were like, oh, we should go up there. And I'm like, the fuck we are. I'm not. No.
I've seen that movie play out, and this is no.
Exactly. I wrote it. I'm like, we're not going up there, y'all.
You're like, I know how this plays out.
You all can go, and if you do, take notes and pictures and bring them back to me.
That's smart. That's smart right there. If you survive, I want to hear about it. Okay, but I wanted to. You mentioned Pet Sematary. The other movie that this surprisingly reminded me of, and this might seem like a stretch at the start, was Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the reason is that the way that this kind of subverts, like, well, not necessarily like the story of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the idea of like rural horror in particular, of the kind of, because a lot of times when we see rural horror, it's always we're following the city folk into it, and we're like alone with them into this sort of like foreign land of sorts, right? Whereas here, the movie starts with the people living in the rural area. We see Ed, we see his son, we see Wallace and his whole crew of family come up. So, you know, we're following them. We're not following these teens who, let's be honest, are kind of the dead teen, disposable teen kind of trope. Like at one point I stopped writing their names down because I couldn't keep track of who was who. And it doesn't matter because we're not following them. They're not the heroes. The hero of the story it's a Greek tragedy of the father. And so we're stuck with them. And so we're not like along with the rural teams coming across this family and then being butchered and us feeling sorry for the teens. I mean, you do feel sorry for them a little bit in this movie, but most of the pathos comes from the people living in this rural town, in particular Ed Harley, as opposed to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the Hills Have Eyes or any of that kind of like, you know, sort of rural-esque type storyline. I thought that was really interesting.
It is. It's like, because the teens essentially, like, not to victim blame, but like they bring it on themselves. It's an accident, which also makes it more tragic. But it's like the dude is, I can't be here because I got busted for drunk driving already, and yada, yada, yada. And, you know, just every wrong decision. And then, of course, Ed not taking the time to be like, okay, one of them did stay.
Yeah.
So maybe they tried to go get help. Because, like, one of them did, like, the brother stayed behind. And, like, there's that really sad moment where he hands Ed the little boy glasses. And he takes them. But yeah, it's, you know, you're right. Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Hills Have Eyes and stuff like that is like, oh, these crazy backwoods mountain people are like cannibals and eating people. It's like, no, these people are living their lives as, you know, they normally do. They have their superstitions. They have their legends, one of which happens to be true. And you infringe upon that. And you call the wrath of Pumpkinhead down on you.
The other thing that kind of jumped out at me this time is sort of Pumpkinhead as a folk horror movie, because like, and maybe it's because like I've been watching a lot of folk horror, reading a lot of folk horror recently with the new Severance set that came out, and Kayla Jensen's 3-hour like deep dive into folk horror. But like I'm watching this and I'm thinking about how, you know, Pumpkinhead is sort of this pagan creation. And in fact, there's like a defiance against Christianity throughout this entire film, with sort of like Maggie's religious. She has a cross. She says the creature's the devil, you know, and she starts praying and she's like, God is the only thing that can stop what's out there. And then Tracy, you mentioned, she grabs the knife and is like, just in case God doesn't show.
God doesn't show.
And then he, you know, marks the cross in her head. I love that, you know, Bunt, which is, what a great name. It's such a weird name, but I love it. You know, is bring him into the demolished church, where it's like the idea of like, oh, the holy ground will save us. God will save us. And he goes in there. Not only does he walk in it, he destroys the cross.
He does. He beats it to death.
And I love this idea of this sort of kind of story that is this folk tale that's been told, and yet it's actually coming true.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the old witch says, like, for every one of man's sins, there's a demon, and like Pumpkinhead is wrath, basically. So it's still in that Christian vein. Yeah. It's just like, it just goes back to, I guess, whenever the first settlers or whoever created him.
Is there like a prequel to Pumpkinhead? I know there's like a bunch of other movies. I haven't seen any of the other ones, but I was like, did they ever try to make a prequel that like explains Pumpkinhead?
They did, and it wasn't great. And like one of the movies starred Bill Clinton's brother Bubba.
What?
Wait, excuse me? What did you?
Yeah, look it up. Bubba Clinton is in one of them. I think it might be the first sequel, Clinton. Blood Wings. But no disrespect to all the people who I know worked really, really hard on those sequels, but my canon of Pumpkin.
Roger Clinton Jr. as Mayor Bubba.
Oh, he was Mayor Bubba.
Mayor Bubba. Roger Clinton. Wow.
Yeah.
So have you seen all the? Cause I didn't know there were 4. I knew the second one because I remember.
I stopped after the second one. Because the explanation they gave, I think that's in that one. I was just like, No. No. So my canon ends at the first movie as far as I'm concerned.
Same. I've not seen the other ones, and I guess the other two were released in 2006 and 2007. They were sci-fi made-for-TV movies, but Lance Henriksen came back for at least one of them, which is
he's
weird,
in the third
wild.
one.
But yeah, I've never seen them, and I didn't even know that the last two existed.
Yeah,
I just remember
remember being excited. It's like I remember being excited there was a sequel, and then you watch and it's like, oh no. It's like that gif of the baby who's like toddling into the room and then sees something, is like, whoop, and then just turns around. Yes, that was my response to the first sequel to Pumpkinhead, and I did see any after.
I also love that it was based on a poem. That someone that what's his name? Ed Justin, who I guess was involved in movie marketing. And apparently, when I was doing some research for it, apparently he wrote it to spook his grandchildren. And they really loved it, and they decided to make a movie off of it. And the poem is out there on the internet. I was reading it. It's cute. I know the first line, stay away from Pumpkinhead unless you're tired of living. Yeah.
He's cold and mean, something, and then unforgiving. Yeah. Like guard dogs in your yard,
Yeah, bolted doors and windows barred. Guard dogs prowling in the yard. Won't protect you in your bed. Nothing will from Pumpkinhead. Love it.
Like, it's just like, your grandpa just recites you a nice little poem before bed. Just like a nice little something he just wrote up for you.
It is amazing, though, how, and I guess is it American? No, Germans did it, because fairy tales, it's like, hey, behave or I'm going to drag your ass out in the woods, leave you, and some witch is going to eat you.
Yeah. I mean, they're all the ones come up with Krampus, like the German
like La Llorona is the same thing. It's just like Latina grandmothers basically telling their kids, is like, behave or this dead woman is going to come get you and drag you into the river. It's like, I don't have time to sit down and try to negotiate with you, child. So I'm going to scare you into behaving.
Scare you into submission. One thing that I did notice on a rewatch as an adult that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it is this movie loves its filter. It loves to use filters. From the opening with the fireplace that's like bathing everything in red light to the kind of the blue filters used at night to make things like extra dark and extra cold. The scene that we talk about that's really sad about Ed holding his dying child. There's all the God rays coming through the window. It's very picturesque, and there's a lot of like use of light and in particular filters in this. I love that the fireplace just bathes everything in red.
Well, like that image of like you're talking about the God light with Ed and his kid. It's like it's like God holding Jesus.
Yeah.
And they mean, like, you killed my child. You killed my only son.
Yeah.
I am now going to bring wrath upon you.
Well, and, like, his only kid is, like, I feel like the only thing he loves, too, Like, he doesn't have a wife.
Yeah.
It's just him and his kid against the world and their dog. And he just has nothing left to live for.
Yeah.
One thing I also did love is that his store is called Harley. What is it? Harley's just a grocery store, but like he's added "and son" on the end, so it's like it wasn't like that. Like it existed at one point, and then when his son came along, he added "and son" on the sign, and I was like, oh, that's such a cute little addition.
It's like when basically like a man like that is like, yeah, my kid probably not going to college or whatever, so he's going to take over the business. Like this is going to be my gift to him.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me put son up there.
I just loved it.
Tragedy.
And then tragedy.
Yeah. And then tragedy.
There's a couple of miscellaneous things that I found out about this film though too. When the teens all hide up in that cabin, I kept watching this going, that cabin is so familiar. And it's because it's the same cabin they used in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, the Jarvis family cabin. That makes sense. It's the same cabin. And it was there's just one shot of the door, and because that's the door that Jason famously breaks through, and it's used on the GIF all over the internet. But like I'm watching some like, this looks so familiar, and it turns out that it's the same house. Also, Gypsy, the dog, was played by Mushroom, who was the same dog that played Billy's dog, Barney, in the Gremlins.
Aw,
Mushroom.
Mushroom.
What a sweet boy.
Only had 2 credits to his name, but
Hey, 2 good credits, though.
2 great.
I know,
credits.
yeah,
say.
Gremlins and Pumpkinhead.
Can't go wrong
Seriously.
with that.
No.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think. Well, okay. I do want to talk.
Oh, that's Stan Winston, right?
Stan
Sorry,
Winston.
I totally forgot to talk about him.
Yeah, so this was his directorial debut. I think it looks like he only directed 2 feature films. The second one was A Gnome Called Norm, which I saw a trailer for as I was doing some research, and it looks really wild. Has either of you ever seen that movie?
I've not seen that one.
I saw you write down the name, and I was like, "What is that? A real thing?"
It looks wild. You know that they have the trailer on IMDb that just starts playing once it's on the page, and I'm like, wow, what a kids movie. Like definitely like a 90s type.
I figured a gnome named Norm has to be a kids movie.
But the plot of it, I have to just bring this up because the plot just made me cackle. A Los Angeles police detective partners up with a talking gnome in order to bring down the head of a crime ring.
I mean, that is a perfect 80s encapsulation of what was happening. But it's it's like Maniac Cop, except with a gnome and for kids.
Yes, exactly. And oh my gosh, the Blu-ray picture of it. I'm gonna put this in chat so you guys can see it. This young cop with like this weird ass gnome.
Oh,
I guess,
wow.
just leaning against
I remember
him.
seeing this.
Do you?
I remember seeing this at the video store and not knowing what the heck it was. It's one of those things where it's like in the 80s, like the cover had to sell you on whether or not you wanted to like take a chance on the movie and rent it. And no shade to the cover designer, but I'm just like, I don't know what that is. It kind of looks like a Muppet, but it's not a Muppet.
It's kind of terrifying.
It kind of reminds me of a Gelfling, but
yes.
no.
A hairy Gelfling.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I was like, yeah, I'll just rent The Secret of Nim again.
And Anthony Michael Hall is in it as the lead.
Yeah.
Of course he was.
I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
it looks like it.
It looks like it, which is incredible. Wow, what a career. Pumpkinhead and then a gnome named Norm.
But his special effects work, I mean,
Yeah.
hands down. Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, Aliens, it's a who's who of like
Predator.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my all-time favorite stories about like him and James Cameron. Like they were on a plane going somewhere, and this was after like they'd already started filming Predator. And I don't know if you've ever seen the original design of that monster. It just looked like a really weird anteater that Jean-Claude Van Damme was running around in a suit. It looked bad.
Wow.
And so John McTiernan was like, we have to have a new design. And they spent money and, called Stan Winston and is like, hey, we need this and we need it ASAP. And Stan was on the flight with James Cameron. And he's like just drawing the design because Stan was like, I'd always like liked the Rastafarian dreadlock look. And so James just like leans over and is like, you know what? I've always wanted to see something with mandibles. It's kind of like a challenge to his friend. And then Stan was like, oh, you want to see mandibles? Here you go, your fucking mandibles. Like, it's like part of the
You
special
want to
features.
see mandibles?
Oh, you want to see mandibles? Here you go. And so that's where that came from. Was basically James Cameron giving his friend shit. It's like, let's see some mandibles.
Iconic. That's an iconic look, though.
That's fucking incredible.
It is, but it's also, it's like, as a teen, you just think, of course it makes sense that the Predator looks like this. Like, until you grow up and start, like, getting into movies, you don't realize everything it takes to go into making a movie. And then, like, to hear, like, that's how that came about?
Right. That's hilarious.
Yep.
Really?
That's incredible.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the original design is truly something.
Yeah, it is. If you haven't seen it, people, Predator original design. And know that Jean-Claude Van Damme was the stuntman in that suit.
Great. Yep.
Oh, I'm looking at it now, and wow.
Yeah, I'm glad they redid that one.
There's a special feature on the DVD. It's probably on the Blu-ray as well, where they show you like the raw footage of this thing moving through the jungle. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
It looks ridiculous.
Wow. Listeners, we'll tweet out a photo of it too, so you guys can see it.
Absolutely.
Oh, I will say personal anecdote about Stan Winston. Sorry, my apologies.
No, you're fine.
Apologize.
I remember, like, I obviously love Pumpkinhead, Aliens, Predator. Like, I always wanted to grow up and write a movie monster that Stan Winston and or his crew would have designed. Like, that was my childhood teenage dream. And I was working in Hollywood. I think it was like 2007, 2008. And like got the headline that like Stan Winston had passed. And like, I'm just sitting in this office, like trying not to cry. And I call my dad. My dad was the first person I called. I'm like, Stan Winston just died. And my dad was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Because he knew what it meant to me to like have him design something for me. So yeah, R.I.P. to Stan Winston, man. Like
legend.
I cannot emphasize how much he's influenced me in my career.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of like the movie monster designer of, well, I mean, we're the same age of our childhood. I mean, you look at all the movies. Yeah, exactly. You look at all the stuff that were favorites for me. Aliens, you know, The Monster Squad, Predator, Leviathan, Jurassic Park. Like these were all movies that were constantly cycled from my first childhood up to being a teenager, was constantly just seeing his creature design, and he has a legacy. He's an icon. I don't think he ended with it, but like he did Iron Man. Yeah, he sure did.
That was him. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that he did that. Holy shit! R.I.P. Stan Winston, a legend. All right, let's give this movie our rating out of 5. Terry, how many pumpkin graveyards out of 5 do you give Pumpkinhead?
I mean, this movie is like, even though it's so weird that even though as I was watching it, and I couldn't remember much about it, it felt like nostalgia and it felt like childhood for me when I was rewatching it. Even though I didn't remember most of the storyline about it, just the scenes. I think the everything from the set design to the creature design to the tragedy underneath it. I think it works really well. I think it's one of those films that feels like it's a rated R movie, but it's for kids. Like in a weird way, because it feels like a fairy tale. It feels like a fable. It feels like that kind of thing that I would grow up on. I think this movie is great. I think it's held up really well, in particular with the special effects and the monster design. For me, I think this is I think it's a 4 Pumpkinhead graveyard for me. What about you, Mary Beth?
I think I agree with 4 pumpkin graveyards. I don't think Pumpkinhead gets enough credit for being an iconic monster. Like, I feel like with a lot of like we talked about this with the slasher movies, like you have the killers who are more human, but then you have Pumpkinhead, who is, I mean, human in a way, and is like such a cool monster and such a unique looking monster. Like, we don't have a lot of stuff that looks like that in a way. And so I just feel like watching this again, I really appreciated what Pumpkinhead is and how much I love him as a villain, like a horror movie villain, not just a monster, but like as a thing that has like intelligence and wants to kind of fuck with its victims in a way that I hadn't thought about before. Like, especially the church scene when he bursts in is just like, that was bone chilling. So, and from the practical effects and like the kind of the folk horror vibe, I think this is definitely a 4 out of 5 for me. Akela, you have the final word. How many pumpkin graveyards? I think I know the answer, but how many pumpkin graveyards?
I can't be objective about this. It's going to be 5 pumpkin graveyards out of graveyards. I obviously love this movie, and yeah, it holds up, and the special effects especially like are still remarkable. And it's like the argument that I would use like in anything like for practical effects with maybe some like CGI cleanup, but you honestly can't beat having a dude in a suit that is built really well and looks real on set with your actors, and they're interacting with that, as opposed to a tennis ball on a stick. So,
yep, exactly.
It's like, it's a tragic, heartbreaking story about grief that goes incredibly tragically wrong.
Yeah.
And, Lance Henriksen, who is also like one of the top, character actor of the 80s, like Terminator, Pumpkinhead, Aliens. Near Dark. Like, I am a fan of all the stuff that he does.
Which, by the way, he looks hot in this movie. I was not.
With the shirtless thing.
Oh yeah, when like he's introduced as an adult, and I'm just like, oh, okay, Daddy. Like, I'm here for this.
But did you know, like, he tried to like, I don't want to say ugly himself up, but like he went to it might not have been Stan, but he went to like the makeup crew and was like, I need buck teeth. Like if you look at his mouth, like especially in that opening scene, he's got like buck teeth. That's not his real teeth.
Right.
Like that was a character thing that he added because he felt like someone who grew up there wouldn't have like dentistry, like really. So he wouldn't have had his teeth fixed. But yeah. Buck tooth daddy.
Back tooth daddy.
Buck tooth Appalachian daddy.
I'm here for it. Well, thank you so much, Akela, for joining us to talk about Pumpkinhead. Where can the listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you can share with our listeners?
Well, thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. Listeners can find me bitching about sports and or politics. Sorry, on Twitter. Football season is almost over, probably, so that'll wane after a while. My handle is @Akela Cooper. I'm also on Instagram, though not really posting there that much, like just professional stuff. But yeah, Twitter is where you can find me if you need me. And yeah, Megan from Atomic Monster and Blumhouse coming out TBD, hopefully 2020, and then Nun 2, hopefully TBD. And I'm not going to say anything else because I'm going to have like every freaking Conjuring Universe fan on Twitter and Instagram being like, so when is that date again? But
I said nothing. You heard nothing.
all I can say is that it's still scheduled to happen, folks.
Sweet.
Sweet.
And yeah, and I have some other things that sadly I can't talk about, but there are many pumpkins in my patch right now.
Hell
yeah.
We love to hear it.
That's awesome. Love to hear it. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Pumpkinhead? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am @MB McAndrews.
And I'm Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter @ScarredPodcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. Also, if you're on Spotify, you can now rate podcasts on Spotify. So go out there and just hit that little rating, please.
Please. Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the children. Somebody please think of the children. Somebody please think of the children.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.